Taylor Coronado, who would later become known as Taylor Schabusiness, was a 25-year-old Green Bay, Wisconsin resident with a history of meth addiction and violent behavior. On the morning of February 23, 2022, at approximately 3:25 a.m., her former high school boyfriend, 24-year-old Shad Therian, was discovered deceased in the basement of his mother's residence at Stony Brook Lane. The circumstances surrounding his death would reveal one of the most disturbing homicide cases in Brown County history. Taylor Schabusiness, Therian's mother, had been awakened by the sound of a door slamming in her home. Upon investigating a light that remained illuminated in the basement, she discovered her son's severed head concealed within a bucket and covered with a blanket. The 911 call initiated an investigation that would uncover evidence of strangulation, post-mortem sexual assault, and extensive dismemberment carried out over a period exceeding 24 hours. Let's start at the very beginning. Taylor Coronado was born in Green Bay to a family struggling with severe alcoholism. At age 11, she experienced the death of her mother from cirrhosis, a condition resulting from chronic alcohol abuse. Her father discovered his wife deceased in their bed, a traumatic event that would significantly impact Taylor's psychological development and set her on a path towards substance abuse and violence. Following her mother's death, Taylor's father remarried within a relatively short period. The young girl began exhibiting behavioral problems, including alcohol consumption at an unusually early age, followed by experimentation with illicit substances. Her conduct escalated to frequent physical altercations during her high school years, occurring with such regularity that school administrators ultimately expelled her from the institution. During this period, she began a romantic relationship with Shad Therian, though the relationship was brief and the two subsequently separated. By age 19, Taylor had developed a meth addiction. She became involved with Warren Chabot, a drug dealer, and the two married shortly after. In an unusual decision during the marriage proceedings, Taylor chose not to adopt her husband's surname through traditional means, instead legally changing her name to Taylor Schabusiness. This surname would later become nationally recognized following the events of February 2022. The marriage between Taylor Schabusiness and Warren Chabot was characterized by mutual drug abuse and volatile behavior. In July 2020, Taylor was arrested for resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. Several weeks later, she led law enforcement on a high-speed pursuit through Green Bay, refusing to comply with orders to stop until officers successfully intercepted her vehicle. During this period of criminal activity, Taylor was pregnant. Despite her condition, she continued to use meth and other substances. At age 23, Taylor gave birth to a son. Her husband was subsequently incarcerated on drug distribution charges, and she relocated to her father's residence with the intention of rehabilitating her life and maintaining custody of her child. According to individuals familiar with the situation, she achieved a period of sobriety during this time. This stability turned out to be temporary. Taylor lost custody of her infant son. She subsequently learned of her incarcerated husband's infidelity prior to his imprisonment. The situation deteriorated further when her father was arrested and charged with the sexual assault of a 13-year-old girl who was a relative of his new wife. He received a 12-year prison sentence for the offense. These compounding traumas led to a severe relapse. Taylor returned to meth use and reconnected with Shad Therian, her former high school boyfriend. Shad had also developed a substance abuse problem, and the two began regularly using drugs together and engaging in a casual sexual relationship. On Monday, February 21st, 2022, Taylor and Shad spent the day in the company of friends, consuming alcohol and using methamphetamine. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Taylor picked up Shad from his mother's residence on Stony Brook Lane. The two drove to an apartment on Eastman Avenue, where they consumed cannabis with an acquaintance before returning to the Therian residence later that evening. Taylor Schabusiness, Shad's mother, was home and retired to her bedroom at some point during the evening, believing her son and his companion were simply socializing in the basement, an arrangement that had occurred on numerous previous occasions without incident. In the basement, Taylor and Shad continued to consume a combination of substances, which investigators would later describe as a drug cocktail that included meth and other drugs. Their judgment was significantly affected, and the two engaged in sexual activity. According to Taylor's subsequent confession to law enforcement, Shad expressed a preference for rough sexual encounters, including choking. He was wearing a chain around his neck, which Taylor began to pull with increasing force while positioned above him. In her statement to Detective Graff, Taylor described observing Shad's face change colors from red to purple to blue, stating that she found the visual transformation fun. She witnessed him cough up blood and felt his heartbeat weaken beneath her hands until it ceased entirely. Shad Therian was dead from strangulation. Rather than calling emergency services or alerting Shad's mother, who remained asleep upstairs, Taylor made a series of decisions that would shock even the homicide investigators. According to her confession, the realization that Shad was deceased produced a state of excitement. She continued to engage with his corpse sexually for several hours, as documented in the charges that would later include third-degree sexual assault of a corpse. At some point during the early morning hours, Taylor fell asleep in the basement alongside Shad's body. Upon waking, she determined that she wanted to transport his remains to her own residence. Unable to move Shad's body intact, Taylor proceeded to dismember the corpse. She walked up the stairs to the kitchen, located several knives in the drawers, and returned to the basement to begin the process of sectioning the body. She later told investigators that she experimented with different implements and determined that a serrated bread knife was most effective for cutting through tissue and bone. Taylor first severed Shad's head from his body, placing it inside a bucket she found in the basement. She then removed his genitals and placed them in the same container. Following this initial phase of dismemberment, Taylor again fell asleep in the basement. Upon waking, she resumed her work, cutting Therian's torso in half longitudinally and distributing various body parts into bags, boxes, and a storage tote she located throughout the basement. This process continued for more than 24 hours. During this extended period, Taylor continued to use meth, and the combination of drugs and sleep deprivation produced hallucinations. She later reported to investigators that she experienced recurring visions of Shad's arm growing back after she had severed it, requiring her to repeatedly remove the same limb. During her interrogation, Taylor told Detective Graff that law enforcement would have fun attempting to locate all of Shad's organs as she had dismembered the body so thoroughly. She stated that most body parts should be located in the basement, with the exception of a foot or leg that would be found in her vehicle. When questioned about the disposition of the head, she calmly described placing it in the black bucket and covering it with a blanket. She acknowledged becoming paranoid and lazy due to drug effects during the latter stages of the dismemberment. Taylor's stated intention was to transport all of Shad's remains from the residence. However, due to what she characterized as laziness, she only succeeded in placing a leg and foot in her van before departing the scene. Most significantly, she left the bucket containing Shad's severed head in the basement. At approximately 2 to 3 a.m. on February 23, 2022, Shad's mother was awakened by the sound of a door closing forcefully. She noticed that a light remained on in the basement and walked down the stairs to investigate, likely assuming her son had either left the residence or had forgotten to turn off the light. The discovery of her son's severed head in the bucket would traumatize her permanently. The 911 call was placed at 3:25 a.m. Responding officers discovered dried blood on a mattress and human remains distributed throughout the basement. In a storage tote, they located Shad Therian's upper torso. Multiple knives were found in a black bag, and additional body parts were recovered from various locations in the basement. Tara informed investigators about Taylor Schabusiness, identifying her as her son's former girlfriend from high school and the last person known to have been with him. Officers immediately proceeded to Taylor's apartment, where her minivan was parked with visible blood on its exterior. When located, Taylor had dried blood covering her clothing and hands, yet had applied a full face of fresh makeup, as though preparing for a normal day. A search of the vehicle revealed a leg and foot inside a crockpot box on the rear seat, exactly as Taylor would later describe in her confession. She was taken into custody and transported for interrogation. The interrogation of Taylor Schabusiness, conducted by Detective Graff, was notable for the defendant's affect and demeanor. She displayed a remarkable absence of emotional response when discussing the events, speaking in a casual, matter-of-fact tone that disturbed the investigators present. When asked to explain what had occurred, Taylor replied, "That is a good question." She proceeded to describe the drug use, the sexual activity, and the use of chains during the encounter. She claimed to have blacked out during a portion of the events, but then stated that she went crazy and began strangling Shad. She acknowledged that killing him was not her initial intention. However, Taylor then stated that she enjoyed the act of choking Shad, which motivated her to continue until he was deceased. She admitted to engaging in sexual acts with his corpse following his death, which formed the basis for the third-degree sexual assault charge. Throughout the interrogation, Taylor exhibited no visible signs of remorse, grief, or horror at her actions. She showed no emotions and shed no tears. When questioned about the excitement she claimed to have experienced during the killing, she made a sexually explicit and inappropriate comment suggesting that investigators could examine her underwear if they wanted evidence of her level of arousal. Taylor provided a detailed account of the dismemberment process, describing which implements proved most effective, where she obtained the bags and containers, and how her original plan to transport all remains was abandoned due to what she termed laziness. While she acknowledged that meth likely contributed to paranoid thinking, she made no attempt to use drug intoxication as an excuse for her conduct. Forensic examination of Taylor's mobile phone revealed evidence that provided crucial context for understanding the methodical nature of the dismemberment. Investigators discovered numerous photographs of Jeffrey Dahmer, one of Wisconsin's most infamous serial killers. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered 17 young men and boys in Milwaukee, approximately 100 miles south of Green Bay. His crimes included murder, dismemberment, retention of body parts as trophies, and cannibalism. His case achieved international notoriety when discovered in 1991. During the trial, former Green Bay Police Lieutenant Yana Luberta testified regarding the phone's contents. The device contained approximately 24 searches for information about Jeffrey Dahmer, along with multiple saved photographs of the serial killer. Most significantly, on February 12, 2022, just 11 days before Shad's murder, Taylor had taken a selfie photograph in which she was smiling beside an image of Jeffrey Dahmer displayed on a cell phone screen. Her expression in the photograph appeared pleased and proud. The search history from February 12th and 13th revealed additional disturbing queries. Taylor had searched for Jeffrey Dahmer, the definition of cadaver, blow-up doll customized face, and Chef Boyardee, an internet meme that combines the serial killer's image with Chef Boyardee branding. These searches occurred 10 days before she killed and dismembered Shad Therian in his mother's basement. Media outlets subsequently referred to Taylor Schabusiness as Lady Dahmer. The evidence suggested that this was not a spontaneous act of violence, but rather an offense committed by an individual who had been researching dismemberment, deceased bodies, and one of history's most notorious killers, then proceeded to commit remarkably similar acts. In September 2022, Taylor's attorney entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The defense strategy centered on arguing that Taylor was so severely mentally ill and detached from reality that she could not be held criminally responsible for her actions. This defense was significantly undermined by an incident on February 14, 2023. During a court hearing in which her attorney was requesting additional time to evaluate her competency, Taylor suddenly attacked Quinn Jolly, her own defense counsel, in the courtroom. Multiple officers were required to restrain her and remove her from Jolly. The attack was captured on video and widely disseminated through media channels. Despite this incident, Taylor was ultimately determined to be competent to stand trial. The trial commenced in July 2023 and attracted national attention. The prosecution presented a methodical case that included Taylor's videotaped confession, physical evidence recovered from multiple crime scenes, and testimony from the medical examiner who had processed Shad Therian's remains. Dr. Vincent Tranchita testified that Shad died from strangulation. His testimony regarding the post-mortem treatment of the body was particularly disturbing. His left foot had been severed and then inserted into his own chest cavity. The body was essentially exsanguinated due to the thoroughness of the dismemberment. The defense presented expert witnesses who testified regarding Schabusiness's mental health issues, traumatic childhood experiences, and substance abuse. Dr. Diane Litton, an independent psychologist, testified about various mental health conditions Schabusiness appeared to exhibit during evaluations conducted at the Brown County Jail. However, Dr. Litton's testimony was complicated by the fact that during one evaluation session, Taylor had thrown a plastic chair at her. This incident, along with other evidence, suggested that while Taylor may have suffered from mental health issues and been under the influence of drugs, she retained sufficient awareness of her actions. She had attempted to conceal evidence, transport body parts, and clean the scene. These behaviors indicate consciousness of wrongdoing rather than complete detachment from reality. On July 26, 2023, the jury returned verdicts of guilty on all 3 counts. first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault. Taylor displayed minimal reaction upon hearing the verdicts. On September 27, 2023, Taylor Schabusiness appeared before Brown County Circuit Judge Thomas Walsh for sentencing. The courtroom was at capacity, with Shad's family members occupying the front row. Many family members were visibly emotional as they awaited the court's decision regarding the woman who had killed their loved one in such a horrific manner. Judge Walsh addressed the gravity of the offense directly, stating, "The offense in this case can't be overstated." He then imposed the sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Taylor Schabusiness would remain incarcerated for the remainder of her natural life. Following the sentencing, prosecutors spoke to media representatives. One official stated, "There aren't really words for it," acknowledging the difficulty of adequately characterizing the brutality of the offense. Shad Therian was 24 years old at the time of his death. He was survived by his mother and other family members who would carry the trauma of his murder indefinitely. Taylor's violent behavior did not cease following her incarceration. She is currently housed at Taycheedah Correctional Institution in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. In December 2024, she was charged with assaulting a sergeant at the prison. While details of the incident remain limited, the charge indicates she physically attacked a correctional officer. Subsequently, in April 2025, during a preliminary hearing related to the assault charge, Taylor attacked her attorney for the second time in a courtroom setting. A not guilty plea was entered on her behalf, and she awaits trial on the assault charge as of this writing. The pattern of violence appears to be an inherent aspect of Taylor's behavioral profile, persisting even within the structured environment of a correctional facility. Several aspects of this case remain subject to interpretation and analysis. The extent to which drug intoxication, childhood trauma, and pre-existing mental illness contributed to Taylor's actions continues to be debated. The evidence of her obsession with Jeffrey Dahmer, including the photographs, search history, and selfie taken 11 days before the murder, suggests that she had been contemplating this type of violence for a substantial period before the offense occurred. Whether this indicates she planned the murder in advance, or whether her fascination with Dahmer simply became reality when drugs lowered her inhibitions, remains unclear. The jury concluded that Taylor Schabusiness understood what she was doing and should be held criminally responsible. She made deliberate choices, demonstrated consciousness of guilt through her attempts to transport and conceal evidence, and showed awareness of the wrongfulness of her conduct. While Taylor undoubtedly suffered from psychological issues and was under the influence of meth during the offense, the evidence indicates she retained awareness of her actions and their consequences. Her behavior suggests not incomprehension but rather indifference to the moral and legal implications of her conduct. In the extensive media coverage of this case, Shad Therian's identity as a complete human being can become obscured by the focus on the perpetrator and the disturbing details of the crime. Shad was 24 years old, resided with his mother, and struggled with substance abuse, a condition affecting millions of Americans. Despite whatever mistakes he may have made in his life, he did not deserve the fate he suffered. His mother, Tara Pakanich, will carry the psychological trauma of discovering her son's severed head for the remainder of her life. The knowledge of how he died and what was done to his body post-mortem represents a burden that no parent should bear. The Green Bay community was profoundly affected by this case. Law enforcement officers with decades of experience described it as among the most disturbing investigations they had encountered. Prosecutors characterized it as one of the most serious offenses in the county's recent history. The case of Taylor Schabusiness and the murder of Shad Therian represents a convergence of multiple destructive factors: substance abuse, mental illness, childhood trauma, violent tendencies, and an apparent obsession with death and notorious killers. Schabusiness will spend the remainder of her life in prison, and based on her continued violent behavior in custody, she appears to have no intention of rehabilitation. She has demonstrated no authentic remorse for her actions. Meanwhile, a family continues to grieve. A mother lives with permanent psychological trauma. A community has been forced to confront the reality that such extreme brutality can occur in their jurisdiction. Justice was achieved in the procedural sense. Taylor was apprehended, prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced to the maximum penalty available under the law. However, the horror of the offense cannot be reversed. Shad Therian died in a manner that defies adequate description, and his remains were treated with unimaginable desecration. The case serves as a reminder of the capacity for extreme violence that can emerge when multiple risk factors converge. It underscores the importance of addressing substance abuse, monitoring individuals with violent histories, and taking warning signs seriously. Most importantly, it reminds us that behind every true crime case is a real victim whose life had value and whose loss creates permanent grief for those who knew them. This case will be studied by criminologists, psychologists, and law enforcement professionals for years to come, not because of the perpetrator's notoriety, but because understanding how such extreme violence occurs is essential to preventing it in the future. If you or someone you know is struggling with substance abuse or violent thoughts, resources are available. The SAMHSA National Helpline provides free, confidential support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in English and Spanish. Mental health crisis services are available in every state through the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Getting help is not a sign of weakness, but an act of strength that can save lives. Thank you for watching this video of a difficult and disturbing case. While these stories are challenging to process, documenting them serves an important purpose, honoring the victims, understanding the warning signs, and hopefully preventing future tragedies. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss future cases. Your support through likes and shares helps these important stories reach more people. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on this case, and let me know what case you'd like to see covered next. Hope to see you next time.